The rain had been falling for hours now. Not the angry, heavy kind that pounds on roofs and floods streets. This was different, gentle but stubborn, like it had nowhere else to be. It painted everything outside my living room window in soft, blurry strokes. The gray sky melted into the green trees. Streetlights glowed like fuzzy golden bubbles on the wet road. It was exactly the kind of Tuesday night that begged you to stay inside. The kind that whispered, "Come on, grab a book and make some tea." And that's exactly what I'd been doing for the past hour and a half. My house felt like a cocoon tonight, safe and warm and perfectly quiet. Well, almost quiet. The old grandfather clock in the hallway kept its steady tick-tock, tick-tock. And the rain made soft little tapping sounds against the windows, like tiny fingers drumming a sleepy song. This quietness had become my companion over the past 3 years. Ever since Robert died, some nights the silence felt like a good friend, peaceful and comforting. Other nights, like tonight, it felt too big, too empty. Like the house was holding its breath, waiting for something to fill all that space. I had just gotten comfortable on my favorite spot on the sofa. The soft throw blanket was pulled up to my chin, and my chamomile tea sat cooling on the side table. My book lay open in my lap, one of those cozy mystery novels where nobody gets hurt too badly and everything works out in the end. Nothing too heavy or complicated. It's just the perfect thing for a rainy evening. That's when the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the quiet like a knife. Sudden, sharp, completely unexpected. I actually jumped a little. My heart doing a quick flutter in my chest. Who on earth could that be? Nobody just dropped by anymore. Especially not at this hour. Especially not on a dreary weeknight when normal people were home watching TV or already in bed. My first thought was Mrs. Gable from next door. She was sweet, but she had a habit of needing help with things at odd hours. Last month it was a jar she couldn't open. The month before, her cat had gotten stuck under her porch. Maybe tonight it was something with her computer again. I marked my page carefully, right at the part where the detective was about to question the gardener and set the book aside. My bare feet made soft padding sounds on the hardwood floor as I walked to the front door. The peephole was one of those old-fashioned ones that never gave you a really clear view. But I could make out a figure standing on my porch. A man, tall and lean, holding what looked like a collapsed umbrella. Water dripped steadily from it onto my welcome mat. It's the one that said "Home Sweet Home" in cheerful yellow letters. He looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. You know that feeling when someone's face rings a bell, but you can't remember where you know them from? That's exactly what this was. Maybe from the grocery store or the bank. Or one of those neighborhood gatherings that happened every few months. For a moment, I hesitated. It was getting late, almost 9 o'clock. The smart thing would be to just pretend I wasn't home, wait for him to leave. But something about the way he stood there, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, didn't seem threatening, or like ... uncertain, nervous even. I unlocked the deadbolt but kept the chain latch hooked. Old habits. Robert had always been big on safety, especially for a woman living alone. "Hello." I called through the crack in the door. My voice sounded rusty from not talking to anyone all day. The man looked up and I saw surprise flicker across his face. Then it softened into a polite, tired smile. The kind of smile that said he'd had a long day, Sarah. Sarah Miller. His voice was gentle, uncertain. "Hi, it's Mark. Mark Jensen, Lisa's brother-in-law." And just like that, the puzzle piece clicked into place. Lisa, my best friend since college days. My closest friend, really, the one who still called me every week, who remembered my birthday, who brought me casseroles when I was sick. Her husband Tom had a younger brother named Mark. I'd met him maybe 5 or 6 times over the years. Always at Lisa's big family gatherings, those summer barbecues where everyone brought something and the kids ran around in the backyard until dark. For the holiday parties where Lisa went overboard with decorations and made too much food. Mark was the quiet one? Pleasant enough. always polite when we talked, but we'd never really had what you'd call a real conversation. Just the usual small talk. How's work? Nice weather we're having? Did you try Lisa's potato salad? That sort of thing. Seeing him standing on my doorstep on a rainy Tuesday night was like finding a penguin in your garden. Not scary, just ... completely out of place. Mark, yes, of course. Wow. Hello? I fumbled with the chain lock, my fingers clumsy with surprise. What on earth brings you out this way? Is everything okay? Lisa and Tom are all right, aren't they? That was my first thought, that something terrible had happened, that he was here to deliver bad news. Because why else would Lisa's brother-in-law show up at my door at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night? He must have seen the worry in my face, because he quickly shook his head, raindrops flying from his dark hair. Oh no, everyone's fine. Sorry to scare you. He gave me another small smile, looking a bit embarrassed. I know this is strange, just showing up like this. I know it's late. He gestured vaguely down the dark street where I could see his car parked under the streetlight. A nice sedan, dark blue or black, hard to tell in the rain. I was actually in the area, had a late meeting that went longer than expected. He paused, running a hand through his damp hair. I was driving home and I guess I took a wrong turn somewhere. Ended up on your street, saw your lights on, and ... He trailed off, looking almost sheepish. Honestly, I suddenly remembered Lisa mentioning you lived around here. It was just impulse, really. Probably not my smartest idea. I can go if this is weird. There was something in his voice, a tiredness that went deeper than just a long day. At work, a heaviness that made something inside me soften, despite the strangeness of the situation. And honestly, Lisa would have my head if she found out I'd left her brother-in-law standing in the rain like a stray dog. No, don't be silly, I said, stepping back and opening the door wider. Come in, get out of the rain. You look absolutely soaked. He hesitated for just a moment, maybe second-guessing his decision to knock, then stepped inside. He brought with him the fresh scent of rain and cool night air. Something else, too. A faint trace of cologne or aftershave that smelled like cedar and rain-washed stones. Thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate this. He carefully placed his dripping umbrella on the tile floor by the door, making sure it wasn't in anyone's way. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Not at all, I said, which was only partly true. My quiet evening was definitely interrupted, but my curiosity was fully awake now. Let me take your jacket. Go on through to the living room and make yourself comfortable. I helped him out of his damp coat, good quality wool, the kind that probably cost more than I spent on clothes in 3 months. He was taller than I remembered, and there was something solid and dependable about him. Like his brother Tom, but different somehow. Less settled. More restless. I hung his jacket on the coat rack by the door, hoping it wouldn't drip too much on my hardwood floors. When I walked into the living room, he was standing by the fireplace, looking at the photos on the mantelpiece. There was the one of Robert and me from our trip to Maine, both of us younger, both of us laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. We looked so happy in that picture, so sure that we had all the time in the world. That's a wonderful photo, he said quietly, turning as I entered the room. Lisa's shown me a few pictures of you two over the years. You both look really happy. We were, I said, feeling that familiar pang in my chest. 3 years later, and it still caught me sometimes. Softer now, less sharp, but always there. That was such a good trip. An awkward silence stretched between us for a moment. The grandfather clock kept ticking. The rain kept drumming. I realized I didn't really know what to do with this unexpected visitor. Can I get you something? I offered, moving toward the kitchen. Tea, coffee, or maybe something stronger. It feels like that kind of night. He ran both hands through his damp hair, making it stick up a little. It made him look younger, less formal. You know what? Cup of tea sounds perfect. If it's not too much trouble, no trouble at all. As I headed to the kitchen to put the kettle on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this quiet, unexpected visit was about more than just getting out of the rain. Mark Jensen didn't seem like the type to just drop by on impulse. There was something else going on here, something that had brought him to my door on this particular rainy Tuesday night. The house suddenly felt less empty. There was a strange energy in the air now, not uncomfortable, just different. Like when you're reading a good book and you can feel that something important is about to happen. The mystery wasn't in my novel anymore. It was standing in my living room, dripping quietly on my area rug. The kettle whistled softly, breaking through my thoughts. I found two of my favorite mugs, the sturdy ceramic ones that felt good in your hands and kept tea hot for ages. For a moment, I debated between the chamomile I'd been drinking and something with a bit more strength. English breakfast seemed more appropriate when you had company, even unexpected company. As I arranged everything on a tray, the mugs, a small bowl of sugar, a little pitcher of milk, I could hear Mark moving around softly in the living room, the quiet creak of floorboards, the soft sound of him settling into a chair. It was strange, having another person's presence fill up spaces that had been empty for so long. Not unwelcome, just different, like hearing a new song in a room where you'd only listened to silence. When I carried the tray back into the living room, he was sitting in the armchair across from the sofa. His elbows rested on his knees, and he was looking thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. When he saw me, he straightened up and gave me a grateful smile. "That smells amazing." "Thank you, Sarah. This is really kind of you, especially considering I just showed up out of nowhere." "It's just tea," I said, setting the tray down on the coffee table between us. "Help yourself to whatever you need." I poured the hot water over the tea bags, watching the water turn golden brown. The rich, familiar scent filled the air between us. Milk, sugar. "It's just a splash of milk, please." I prepared his tea the way he liked it and handed him the warm mug. Then I made my own, a little milk, no sugar, and settled back onto the sofa. I wrapped both hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into my palms. Sometimes the simplest things were the most comforting. So I began gently, not wanting to pry, but needing to understand. "You said you had a late meeting around here?" He nodded, taking a careful sip of his tea. I could see him thinking, choosing his words. "Yeah, over on Elm Street." "Client dinner that just kept going and going?" He gave a small, tired laugh. "You know how those things can be? Everyone's trying to be polite, but really, they just want to go home." I knew he worked in finance, something with investments. Lisa had mentioned once. High-pressure stuff. The kind of job where you wore expensive suits and had dinner meetings. That determined whether people's retirement plans would work out. On my way back, I guess I took a wrong turn somewhere, ended up cutting through this neighborhood instead of taking the main road. He paused, swirling the tea gently in his mug. "And like I said, I saw your lights on and just acted on impulse." He was quiet for a moment, staring down into his tea. When he looked up again, there was something different in his expression. More honest, more tired. "Truth is, Sarah, it wasn't just the rain that made me stop. It's been a long day. A long week, really. Maybe a long year." He gave me a rueful smile. "I saw your lights and I remembered Lisa talking about you. And I guess I just needed, I don't know, something different than going home to an empty apartment and leftover takeout." There it was. The real reason. Not the rain, not the wrong turn. Something heavier. Something that had been weighing on him. I didn't push, just waited. Let the silence sit comfortably between us. The rain continued its gentle tapping against the windows. The clock kept its steady rhythm. Sometimes the best thing you could do for someone was just give them space to decide whether they wanted to talk. "Is there anything you want to talk about?" I offered eventually, keeping my voice light and easy. Sometimes it helps just to say things out loud, or not. No pressure either way. And I meant it. Whatever had brought Mark Jensen to my door on this rainy Tuesday night. Whatever was making him look so tired and lost, he could share it or keep it to himself. Either way was fine with me, but something told me this night was just getting started. Either way, he looked at me then, a direct gaze that held a surprising depth I'd only ever seen him in crowded rooms, making polite small talk. Up close, high eyes were a warm brown flecked with golden. They held a certain wariness, but also intelligence. And sensitivity, its work stuff, mostly. He started, then hesitated, and other things life thinks, I guess. He gave a short, self-deprecating laugh. Sounds pretty vague, doesn't it? Life things rarely fit into neat little boxes, I replied, believey. I know that seemed to relax him slightly. He took another sip of tea. Lissa mentioned you went through a tough Tamia. Few years back with your husband, hesitated carefully, respectfully. I nodded, Robert. Yes, it was sudden. I'm sorry, Hesed, sincerely. I remember Tom and Lissa were very worried about you. They were good friends, I acknowledged still. Our Lissa checks in on me. Constantly, sometimes I think she worries too much. She's protective of the people she cares about, Mark said with a soft smile. It's sown of her best qualities and her most annoying, he added, and we both chuckled. Dead broke the ice a little further. Sophies. Life things, I prompted gently after a moment. Are they Tom and Liz worrying level, or just Mark needs a friendlier level? He considered this, looking down into his mug, probably somewhere in between, nothing catastrophic. It's feeling a bit of drift, I suppose. You ever get that feeling like you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, ticking all the boxes, but you're not entirely sure what direction the ship is heading? His words resonated deeply. Adrift, yes. That way's exactly how I'd felt for months. Maybe years, even before Robert passed. If I watched us floating along routines, buffering sides, but without a clear destination in mind. More often than I'd like to admit, I confessed, it's easy to get caught up in the currents, isn't? I'd looked up. A flicker of surprise and connection in his eyes. Yeah, it is. He leaned back slightly in the armchairs, meaning to settle into the space. I guess I just needed a port in the storm and the hour light was on. He smiled faintly, sorry to mix metaphors so badly. Don't worry about it, I said, smiling back. My metaphorical port is always open for bad metaphors, and people caught in the rain have. Another biscuit. I pushed the plate slightly towards him. He took one, his fingers brushing mine almost imperceptibly as he did a tiny spark. Unexpected, surprising. It wasn't flirtatious, not really, just a moment of human contact that felt amplified in Thequiot's room. We talked then, easily drifting from topic to topic. I discovered a shared love for old black and white movies, the kind that played on Sunday afternoons when we were kids. I mentioned a fondness for hiking, something Robert and I used to do all the time, but I hadn't found the motivation for lately. He asked about my job at the library and really listened when I talked about the satisfaction of connecting someone with a perfect book. It wasn't a threatening conversation, but it flowed. There was an ease between us I wouldn't have predicted. The initial awkwardness had completely dissolved, replaced by a quiet camaraderie. The Rian content, its soft drumming, a constant soundtrack to our unexpected meeting. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 10, the resonant chimes. Momentarily, our conversation, Mark glanced towards the sound, then back at me. Wow, is it that late already? I should probably think about heading off. I've kept y'all long enough, honestly, Mark. Don't worry about the time, I said, meaning it. The prospect of the house falling silent again suddenly seemed less appealing than it had. An hour ago. My book isn't going anywhere. I paused, then added, less you need to get back, of course. He hesitated, swirling the last of the tea in his mug. No, not really, nothing waiting for me, but an empty apartment. He said it lightly, but there was an undercurrent. I recognized the echo of solitude. Hugh ain't married. I knew that much from Lisa, never had been. I thought she'd stayed focused on his career. Another casualty of the drift feeling, I asked gently. Hegave Rye's smile. Something like that too, build a life, work hard, climb Thelador, and then you look around one day realize the ladder was leaning Goggins the wrong wall? Or maybe just a wall. You're not that interested in anymore? He sighed a deeper breath. This time I turned 50 last year. It makes Yodic stock, I knew exactly 48 had felt like a turning point for me. Too even before Robert's death, through wreathing into sharper relief. The sense of time accelerating, of wondering if the path you were on was the one you truly wanted. 50 is just a number I offered, though I knew it was more than that. Beauty's milestones do tend to make us reflective, sometimes uncomfortably. Sound comfortably is the word. He agreed. He looked around the room again, his gaze lingering on the bookshelves crammed with novels, the comfortable clutter of a life lived. You've made a really nice home here, Sarah. It feels warm, grounded. Thank you, I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the tea. It took time, specially after I trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. It must have been incredibly difficult, he said quietly, his gaze meeting mine. Again, there was no pity in it, just simply empathetic. Understanding, and that I realized was incredibly rare. People often didn't know what to say, fumbling with condolences or avoiding the topic altogether. His directness, coupled with genuine empathy, felt strangely comforting. It was, I admitted, for a long time. It felt like walking through fog, everything muffled, indistinct. You just put one foot in front of the other, because you have to. And now he asked it softly. Is the fog lifting? I thought about it. Had it lifted, or had I just gotten used to navigating through? It mostly, I said. There are still foggy days, but there are clear ones too. Sunny ones even. I smiled slightly. Tonight with the rain. Maybe it's just a bit misty, he nodded, slowly absorbing my words. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. I know it's no easy to talk about. It's okay, I replied. Sometimes talking to someone who's outside the immediate circle is easier, less baggage. Maybe he agreed. He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. Can I tell you something about why I really stopped? I held my breath. A second, curious of course. That meeting tonight, he began, lowering his voice slightly, though there was no one else to hear. It wasn't just a clientiner. 'Twas with my boss. He offered me big promotion, partner. Track the thing have supposedly been working towards fourth last 20 years. Wow. Mark, congratulations, I said instinctively. Hess hook his head slowly. That's the thing. It should be thrilled, popping champagne instead, driving away from there. All I felt was hollow, empty, like getting Gexley. What? You thought you wanted on Lido? Realize it won't make you happy. He'll look down at his hands, and I drove around for a bit, thinking a bootwit would make me happy, and I honestly didn't have an answer. That's when he ended up here, saw your lights, and he thought. He trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed again. You thought what? I prompted gently. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe just that talking to Samia Nermal, someone outside of that whole corporate world, might help me clear my head, someone grounded. He looked up at me. Someone like you, I guess. From what Liz has said over the years, you always seem medvery centered me. If only hen you. The internal chaos I often felt, but perhaps compared to the high-stakes world inhabited my quiet life at Thelabury, my cozy Rain Street house did seem like an anchor. Well, I don't know about centered, I chuckled softly, but I'm a good listener and I make decent tea. Hes molded genuine warm smile that reached at his eyes, this time erasing some of the yewiness. You do. The tea is excellent, Wesette, in comfortable silence for Anothermonut. The shared vulnerability hanging the air, creating a delicate tea. Invisible thread between us. It wasn't romantic note, the conventional sense. It was deep earthen, that a sudden, unexpected meeting of minds of souls feeling similarly adrift. The rain outside seemed to soften, thithering, turning into a gentle hush. Thrilled outside felt distant, muffled inside in the warm lamplight. A connection had been forged, quiet and profound, born from an unexpected knock in the door, and a shared sense of searching it was the most surprising and, in its own way, the most intimate conversion I'd had in years. The grandfather clock chimed the half-hour 11:30 mark, sighed again, this time with a sense of resolution. Okay, now I realished. Let you get back to your evening, said, pushing himself up from the chair. Thank you, Sarah, for the tea, the conversation, for letting me barge in like this. You didn't barge, I corrected him, standing up as well. You arrived and you were welcome. I walked with him towards the front door. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind listening streets and the clean scent of washed earth. A sliver of moon peeked through, a break in the clouds. He paused at the door, turning back to face me. Thepperch, light cast shadows, highlighting lines of tiredness around his ice butt. Also the sincerity in his expression. Feel better, he said. Simply clearer note about the job maybe, but just less aloning, the feeling, you know? I know, I replied softly. Sometimes that's all it takes, knowing you're not the only Anna navigating the fog. He nodded, holding me gaze for a moment longer. Thanazasori. Ken, it wasn't overt lying, but it felt significant. Azalant. Acknowledgement of the connection, shared the unexpected understanding, fond in a few hours of conversation. Well, he said, finally breaking the gazine, reaching for the doorknob. Thanks, Gaines. Seriously, anytime Mark drives sci-fi, open the door for him. He stepped out onto the damp porch, retrieving his umbrella, though he wouldn't need it now. He turned back one last time. Maybe I could call you sometime, perhaps? We could grab that coffee, talk more about movies. The question hung in the cool night air, tentative but hopeful. My breath hitched slightly. It wasn't something I had expected or even considered. My life had settled into a predictable rhythm, and the thought, often intentionally disrupting it, of stepping towards something new was both daunting and strangely exhilarating, but Thievening had felt right, honest, real. I'd like that, Mark, I heard myself say, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I'd like that very much. A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming it. Great. That's great. Heg of a small nod. Good night, Sarah. Good night, Mark. I watched him walk down Thepith and get into a dark sedan parked a little way down the street. The engine started quietly, and the headlights cut through the darkness as he drove away. I stood in the doorway for a few moments, longer, breathing in the cool, clean air. The house behind me felt quiet again. But was a different kind of quiet now. No empty, but contemplative, filled with the echo of shared thoughts and the warmth of unexpected connection. Closing the door, I leaned against it for a moment, processing the whirlwind of the last few hours. My friend's brother-in-law, a man I barely knew, had shown up unexpectedly, seeking refuge, not just from the rain, but from a deeper internal storm, and somehow, in sharing our vulnerabilities, our questions about life's direction, we had found a moment of profound clarity and companionship. Nothing dramatic had happened in the way a sensational headline might suggest. There were no shocking revelations, no grand gestures, just conversation, just to meet people, finding a moment of solace and understanding together on an ordinary rainy night. I walked back into the living room, picking up the cooled mugs and the plate with the lone remaining biscuit. My abandoned book lay on the sofa cushions, seeming less appealing now. My own thoughts were more compelling. I hadn't solved Mark's dilemma about his job, nor had I suddenly charted a new course for my own life, but something had shifted that feeling. Off-bung, adrift while still present, feltless, isolating, knowing someone else, seemingly successful and put together like Mark felt it too, made it feel normal, human. I went to the window. Juan looked out at the rain-washed street, moon, now brighter between the scattering clouds. The world looked clearer, somehow fresher. Maybe I thought personal discovery doesn't always come in thunderclaps. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a knock on the door on a rainy night. Sometimes it's found in the simple act of listening, of sharing, all for cognizing a piece of your own surging soul in the eyes of an unexpected visitor. It wasn't a buttrements or fixing each other's problems. It was about connection, pure, simple, human connection, and the quiet realization that even when you feel adrift, you're never truly alone on Thesia. The possibility of coffee, of an author conversation, lingered in the air. Small, hopeful light like the porch light I'd lift on unknowingly, signaling a safe harbor, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet sense of anticipation for what the next tide might